Yeah, so this isn't just for you, but this I'm thinking of you. I'm going to tell the story of Newtown and Cwm Harry and how the Cultivate project came about. I will try and do that in 50 minutes. And there's reasons. I'm not just sort of just telling the story really, but kind of showing the process, perhaps, of hopefully of how we got there, and hopefully, yeah, it should be interesting. So there we go, and I'm recording. So without further ado, I shall begin. This is a Google Earth image from some years ago of the Vastry estate in Newtown. And what we're looking at is a 1970s classic Welsh Development Agency industrial unit. So metal shed, basically. It's a metal shed with a yard behind it. You can see this yard, and I don't know, it's about 2/3 of an acre, shall we say? Not quite an acre. There's some hard standing around here, concrete. Another big metal building next to it. There's a railway line here, look. That's the Newtown to Llanidloes line, goes to Machynlleth. And in this metal shed was housed Cwm Harry. And Cwm Harry are an organisation who make compost from food waste. They don't do it anymore, but they were pioneering and testing strategies to make interventions in the waste stream, and obviously pull out the biodegradables and see it as a resource, which it is, of course, and compost it. Now, there's layers as to reasons why you might want to do that. And obviously, it's a resource; it's not waste. Another reason is Paris have now been moving towards a zero waste strategy. This has been their aspiration for quite a while. And also in Paris, we have a very diffuse, very spread out population. So going around everyone's houses picking up trash is expensive. And so they've been trying to rationalize that. And one of the realizations is that if you don't want to pick up people's black bags every single week, then you've got a problem is people put food waste in them and they put nappies in them, and then they stink and you get rats and stuff. So people moan then. So the number one thing to do would be, don't put food waste in your black bag. If you don't put food waste in your black bag, then it doesn't smell. And also it makes it a whole lot easier to recycle the other recyclables that are in the waste stream. So starting with removing food waste, they then created another scheme down the road which started to pioneer recycling, some of the other recyclables, the plastics and cans and stuff, like now we know. So food waste is a very different deal, though, from doing recycling plastic cans and polypropylene bottles, polyethylene, because food waste is hazardous. And so you've got immediately got a problem. And so you actually got to have a biosecure site. So another thing about Cwm Harry is it had a spiky fence all around it, around the perimeter, because it had to have a secure perimeter because of the food waste. And big lorries coming here and delivering into the factory, and leaving again, coming out this way out. And actually, they weren't really using this area beyond the factory. And as you can see from the photo, it just looks like it's subsoil. It's the clay subsoil that's been, all the topsoil would have been scrapped away when they did the development originally. Throw that away, and the subsoil then was just flat, compacted, and it became a car park. And so probably for the whole of the 1970s, there were just big trucks parking on that land. So very, very compressed, compacted, dead soil. That's really, really important to stress. It was really lifeless. That photo of the moss that I've showed a couple of times now with the little birch seeds on it, I took that in the corner of this car park, just about there. So and you can see a little bit of green look there on the overview. So anyway, just a few little details. Anyway, so this is it. It's the Vastry estate in Newtown, just a really horrible industrial estate. When I first went there, so there you go, food waste. This is one of their posters they had in the building. You can let us compost your food waste, or you can send it to landfill. The decision is in your hands. If you would like to compost your food waste and other compostable items, please be sure it goes in the correct bin. So over time, Cwm Harry slowly educated the population, firstly of Newtown, and then I think Montgomery and Welshpool, and it's kind of rolled it out on the whole eastern edge of Powys. Slowly started to educate the population to use a green bin and to devise a system where it wasn't too smelly, it wasn't too icky, to to put people off. So if you've got your green bin, you can put your food waste in there, and again, a lot of interactions involved because people kept getting it wrong and they can't be bothered and they put the wrong things in the bin. There's a lot of toing and froing. It's been a long process. But again, it shows it's possible. We can re-educate populations of people to behave differently according to quite simple, clear instructions, even if they don't fully empathize or understand the scheme. So slowly during this time period, Powys have moved now to they only collect your landfill bag once every 3 weeks, and you're only given I can't remember how many bags. I think they give you 52 bags a year, specially logoed. They'll only take the particular. It's a clear purple bag as well. So in theory, the refuse people can see what's inside it. So if you've got loads of recyclate inside your black bag, they don't take it. If you put loads of non-biodegradables in your biodegradable bucket, they don't take it. If you put cans in your plastic or whatever it is, they don't take it. So there's a bit of stick and carrot as well in terms of behavior change and shifting, obviously, how populations behave. Inside the factory, if we just go back to the overhead, there's the ridge of the roof going down the middle. It's quite big. I can't remember the size of the building now. It's quite sizable. The right-hand side is the dirty half. The left-hand side is the clean half. Food waste, hazardous waste, could contain pathogens, could contain, disease-spreading organisms attractive to rats and other, and flies. So food waste arrives in this door. I've already told you that. So here we go. Food waste arrives, big truck comes in, dumps it in the factory. There's a kind of a division down the middle of the factory. So it's processed in this side, composted, the first hot compost, which in theory should pasteurize the food waste so it has no disease organisms, and then it's carried by tractor into the other side of the factory, and there's a series of composting bays. I can't remember how, 5 or 6, and let's say spends about a week in each one, and the end one is turned out into a truck, and everyone else is sort of, that one's turned to that one, that's turned to that one. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Clear all drawings. Next picture. No. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Right. Inside the factory, you can now see you're on the left-hand, or the right-hand side, the dirty half. You can see it's dirty because there's puddles of horrible water or foul water on the ground, and actually sometimes that would be wriggling with maggots. Not nice, but challenging. This is really an experimental operation. So here you see food waste in bags. They're in biodegradable bags, so that reduces the icky factor, and that was, again, took away some of the resistance of people from doing this scheme. And how do you make compost? What's the ingredients of compost? It's 2 things. It's greens and it's browns. It's nitrogen and carbon. And the nitrogen is the squishy stuff, the greens. And food waste is high in nitrogen. Manure is high in nitrogen. Grass clippings are high in nitrogen. Lots of things like that are very high in nitrogen. The browns are very high in carbon, and by browns we mean leaves. We mean dry stuff, old dry grasses and straw and wood chip and sawdust. And the thing that was available in the Newtown waste stream, the thing that that they wanted to work with most was hedge trimmings. Lots and lots and lots of hedge trimmings. It's a rural town. You can imagine there's lots of hedge trimming going on, power lines, railway lines, all of that stuff. So the Eco Green, this machine here, and it's got, this is a conveyor belt. I would obviously drop that down. So there's the nitrogen has been delivered. The carbon has not been delivered yet, but that will come as a load of tree waste, basically hedge trimmings and power line clearings and stuff like that. And that goes into the green machine is a macerator. It chops it all up. And essentially you want the carbon and the nitrogen mixed together in a very aerobic mix, because we're doing aerobic composting here, the same as what you're doing in your back garden or on your allotment. And we want to have uniform particle size. So it's actually very good to mince up the pieces of wood to make them quite small, because we want to create a lot of surface area to break them down, a lot of edge. Now, another thing we can say though is, when we teach people to do domestic composting, in your garden, we always say don't put woody waste in your domestic compost. It takes up to 3 years for sticks to break down, whereas woody waste will break down in 3 weeks. So the right CN ratio compost, you can make that in 3 weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks, where wood waste takes a lot longer. So, but the macerated tree waste was what we used. So part of resolving that problem was to chop it all up, make it small. And the other part of the problem was still a lot of wood particles came through in the compost, and we just had to sieve it. We had to screen it to take it all out again. But what we found was the sort of part degraded, lumpy bits of wood was a very useful resource for gardens and for mulching, especially for things like forest gardens and stuff like that. So we learned to value all the different outputs and do useful things with them. So that's the dirty half. Okay, sorry, I haven't told you now what happened. So all the good, the carbon, the carbon and the nitrogen, food waste and the tree trimmings go into the macerator. It's all chewed up. And again, there's another little conveyor belt, and it spits it out into this big hopper that you see next to it, big tall hopper. And you can see there's the flaps of the door where the food waste goes in. Now it has to be pasteurized. And because obviously it's a public health, it's a public service, we're working with a public authority, we're managing food waste, we have to know that it's disease free and that we're doing a decent job. So you have to make a good way to make compost is in a batch, and it needs to be a certain size, a big batch of compost, because that gives the ability then to generate a lot of heat. The aerobic composting process is largely driven by thermophilic bacteria. Thermophilic bacteria, they're aerobes, they breathe air, they break down organic matter, and as they do that, they respire at quite a high temperature. They give off a lot of heat. Their bodies give off a lot of heat, and they like to operate in a hot environment. And we're talking up to 70 degrees C. So you mix your compost, mix it all up, throw it into the bin, and very quickly the temperature climbs 30, 40, 50, 60 degrees C. Now, you don't want to really go much above 70, or even as you approach 70, you have a danger of having compost fires and all that sort of stuff. So there's considerations to think about here. But once that compost, so you put it in, the temperature rises, and then it'll fall, and then you've got to turn it, and then the temperature will rise again, and then it will fall. And you have to do that until you have had it at 70 degrees C for 48 hours. It doesn't necessarily have to be continuous 48 hours. It can be for 6 hours and then, restack it and then another 6 hours. But at the end of the day, it's got to be 48 hours. And then you can take a sample from the compost, you send that to the laboratory, and they will test it for salmonella. If there is no salmonella in that compost batch, then it is said to be pasteurized. You get the okay, get the green light. And the salmonella is the indicator species. That's what tells them if you killed the salmonella, you killed the botulism, the listeria, or the tapeworms, any other possible nasty that may or may not have been in there. So now we've got pasteurized 48-hour-old compost. So you put that in a digger. So basically the factory created jobs for kind of, farm workers, tractor boys, as I call them. And then they could move the materials around. 70 degrees, Michelle, 70 degrees C for 48 hours, to answer your question. But it doesn't have to be a continuous 48 hours, but it has to be a total of 48 hours. So once that's done, they would then transfer on a tractor, they'll dig this bay out, and you can just about see in this photo, there's a wheel wash down there on the left. Yeah, it's pretty much cooked, Sean. It's technically, yeah, so you get your pass 100 kite mark, which is where you can use that. So there's your whatever it is, your loader, your digger is going to have to move the material from one side of the factory to the other. And right. So you bring it through to the other side of the factory. So the idea is to try not to spread contamination from one side to the other. That's the purpose of the wheel wash. And now you can see a series of bays with the plastic curtains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't remember whether there were 5 or 6. Anyway, not that it matters. 5. Let's say there's 6 bays. Let's say that each week they turned it once. Again, the whole time that I was there, which was 2 years, they were refining the process. So they were still finding out the optimum way to do it. But you can imagine, if we go to the next picture, this is the back door of the factory. So once once it's been turned and turned and turned, so you can imagine they turn bay 6 out into this big trailer, then bay 5 into bay 6, bay 4 into bay 5, bay 3 into bay 4, so on. And so as it moves through the factory, it's more and more broken down. After it's been turned 5 times, it's compost. And to be honest, actually, we couldn't sell it as compost. We had to call it soil improver. It was more powerful than compost. It was very high in nitrogen. And if it had more carbon, we wouldn't have had to turn it as much. The turning, if you like, here's an explanation, but if there's not enough carbon in the compost, then it goes all mushy and it pushes the air out and it goes anaerobic. And then it starts to ferment and you get bad smells, methane, and that's not what you're trying to do. So by turning it, you're folding air back into it and negating, cancelling out the lack of oxygen issue. Whilst we're here out of the back door of the factory, you can now see this environment, this backyard. There's the spiky fence. They'd already had a couple of polytunnels up, and at the point when I went along, the first time I went along, they had invested a little bit of money in employing a grower to start, professional grower to start growing some veg out the back, because they like the idea of, utilizing some of their own compost. It was costing them a lot of money to someone to commute 1 or 2 days a week from miles away. And obviously with gardening, especially with vegetable gardening, you need to be there. So they had the sort of secretaries from the office going out with watering cans and in their strappy sandals and office, skirts and things, trying to maintain water tomatoes and things in their lunch break, and it clearly wasn't really working. And so at this point, really, I was invited to come along. Again, here we see the yard. There's the factory, lovely, beautiful compost factory. And what we're seeing there is a very big building with a big roof. We're seeing a very bare yard that you might notice has got almost nothing but dock and plantain growing in it. And that's because it's very, very compacted, damaged land. You see there a bit of raised bed made with the Cwm Harry compost with a few plants in it, and there's some wood chip. And it started to try and grow in the polytunnels. But essentially, they'd done a little bit of growing and it wasn't really working. It was a lot of energy, a lot of work. One person was doing it. They were getting a bit stressed, and they were looking for another way forward. And this was when I got invited there. And I got invited there in part because a woman called Hannah Towsey, who was a PDC graduate from way back in 2007, she was working at the factory and had suggested that maybe I might have some ideas about how to approach or what to do with the space, obviously as a kind of permaculture person. So this is how permaculture design works: is you go to a site and you do a survey. You ask yourself what's there, What I saw was the polytunnels. I saw the very damaged ground. I saw the big building. I saw that someone had started trying to grow who wasn't the woman who'd been employed. So I asked about that, and I heard that there was a woman called Emma Maxwell who lives in Llanidloes, and she was a self-employed kind of garden tutor, organic horticulture trainer, and she was starting to run a course there and trying to kind of connect with the people of Llanidloes. So I made note of that as well. And inside the polytunnels, not much going on. They had this basic infrastructure. There's Emma's course. So I came back in May 2010, and I was running a PDC, same as you're on, and I was doing it at, we were at Llanfyllin Workhouse, and I was looking for something to do a design project on. I wanted to have something practical and real for the participants to put their energy into. And we'd already done a couple of designs at Llanfyllin Workhouse with the workhouse people, and they weren't really kind of, yeah, there was no need to kind of do any more, and they hadn't really been tuned in on that wavelength. So we were kind of looking for something more receptive. So I went to Cwm Harry and I said, can we, you know, we'll look at these resources that you have and we'll put together permaculture design. I'll get my student group to do it. And they were very, yeah, sure. Why would they say no? Of course, I said, great, fantastic. So you might notice, if you're very astute, there is a slightly younger version of Mr. Ian Steele there, our host at the farm. And anyway, some other very interesting people who are on this particular PDC. That's not all of them, but just some of them. And anyway, there's us on our site visit, doing a bit of a survey on Cwm Harry and trying to come up with how we might approach doing some kind of permaculture themed community garden. That was my idea. And I thought, well, okay, if you're paying someone to travel a distance to come and not do very much, could we come up with a better plan? Could we somehow utilize the knowledge and skills of Emma Maxwell to have a coordinated sort of horticulture activities? And could we use some of the knowledge and the structures that we've got from permaculture education and kind of bring that together to create a project? So there we have it. So this is kind of the permaculture design process. Is I always say, you know, it's patterns to detail. And we start with what? Observe and interact. Gather together information and energy. That usually translates into making a base map. Here's a base map. We drew an outline. We probably projected that same Google Earth picture onto a wall, drew around it, printed that off a few times, gave that to somebody, gave that to all of the different participants, and told them to go and measure and record what was there already. That's the basis of a design. You start by measuring what's there. Look, we've got a north, we've got an orientation. So we know actually that this is obviously the sunny side, the sunny sector. The sun's going to be coming around here. And and we've got a scale as well, so we've got a sense of the size. Okay. So we had, I can't remember, so we had a dozen people on that course. So we've got a dozen pair of eyes and dozen brains, if you like, to record that information, observe and record it all down, write it all down. So on the left is a slightly, so we've got a very, very rough sketch, and then on the left here we've got something a bit more accurate of, again, recording what's there in the main areas and the spaces. And then having looked at that and having discussed, we started to build a vision for what we wanted our garden to do. What functions is it going to fulfill? How are we going to go about designing for that? So one of our first thoughts was, well, if we want to create a space for people to learn about growing, we want to have lots of different approaches. We don't want to have a monoculture approach. It's not interesting. We've got to approach growing in interesting ways to engage with with a broad section of people. The organisation, Cwm Harry, told us they'd had real trouble getting volunteers to come back, to be regular. They'd recruited the odd person, but typically they hadn't liked each other, or they'd had an argument, so someone came on a Monday, someone else came on a Friday. There was no momentum to it. And they said they found it very difficult. They were slightly skeptical about the idea of a community garden. They didn't know if it would work, and they also thought that powering it with volunteers was, they weren't sure how that would go. And then we sort of said, well, okay, leave that with us, because we're used to doing that kind of thing. And you carry on running your factory. We'll concentrate on the garden. So we started. Here's our, this lovely picture drawn by one of our team members, and it's a concept. It was like a vision that we came up between us. One of the things we thought was, oh, there's a train line running behind the estate, around the industrial estate. Everything on the industrial estate looks ugly, square, metallic, and pointy. What if we put a lovely, interesting, round, soft, organic building in the space? We were told they'd struggled to find, volunteers for gardening, but we thought maybe we might have more success getting volunteers to build a low impact structure. So, and then maybe we could involve them in building the infrastructure of the garden. So there's something a bit more, not just weeding, if you like, a chance to learn some things. And maybe once we built that relationship, we could bring those people forward and involve them more widely with the garden. Another thing that the participants discussed was, if we put the roundhouse there, where the entrance to the space was here, down here, look, let's get my pen. The entrance to the space is here, so we put a raised, a little archway, to a triumphant arch to join the garden. And so when you come around the back of the factory, you look diagonally across. The furthest view you can see and be within the garden is to see the roundhouse. So that invites you in, rather than just this big empty space, which we saw before. There's somewhere to go. It's a destination. Let's build a hard footpath that takes us past the main elements of the garden to the roundhouse, maybe goes past some intensive growing areas and then back out again. So we also thought we'd create a kind of a circular walk. We had a certain amount of budget from the organisation, so we thought we'll make a firm path so that at least people perhaps with limited mobility can walk across the garden, visit the roundhouse, see some of the beds, and come back out again. Simple. There were a few raised beds in already, and then we also part of the diversity was we had this idea that when people volunteer, some people don't really want the responsibility of having to have their own plot or make decisions. And we found some of the volunteers are very timid or, quite shy people. So some of those people just wanted to join in and be part of a work detail, be part of a team. Other people actually wanted to have their own individual plot. And I'd seen on a visit to see some community allotments in America a year or two before, this idea of 1 meter square micro allotment plots. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And we also did a bit of a survey speaking to people around in Newtown and said to them, do you grow food? And if not, why not? And the kind of reasons that we got for people not growing their own foods, well, we don't have a garden. We don't have any land. I didn't really know how to do it. I don't have the tools. I wouldn't know where to start. I don't really have any money. I would be scared that it would be too much work. Oh, allotments are really big, aren't they? Can you get an allotment? Oh, they're a bit big. Sounds like hard work. Those are all the reasons that people didn't grow. And so we thought, well, could we construct a scenario where we could remove all of those barriers? So instead of having a big, scary plot, how about we give you something that's 1.2 meters by 2.4 meters? 1.2 meters for a reason is a raised bed of 1.2 meters is you can reach about 60 centimeters until you fall over. So it's what we call a double reach bed. So I can reach 1 meter, I can reach into the middle, 60 centimeters from one side, and then go around the other side and reach 60 centimeters into the middle from the other. That makes 1.2 meters. If you make it too long, anything longer than 3.6 meters, then instead of walking around to the other side, people jump over because they're kind of lazy. So we came up with these kind of things for a reason, and just drawing on some of Emma's experience in horticulture and also a lot of stuff that I'd learned in permaculture. So we came up with this idea of micro allotment plots. Maybe you could pay £10 a year. That meant that that micro plot was yours for the whole year. You got the access code for the tool shed, so you could use our tools. We had compost. We had plants and seeds which you could use. So we've taken away all of the barriers. If you don't know what to do, ask Emma. Ask Steve. If you don't know whether you don't have tools, use our tools. All you have to do is commit, is to sign on a dotted line and give us 10 quid. And we thought, no matter how skint you are, if you really want to do this, you can put 10 quid into the pot. You can pay us on in installments if you really had to. So what we started to then to realize, if we were creating a community garden, we needed to create a set of strategies to connect the garden to the community. You can't just sit there and expect them to come. You've got to go and do some outreach. You've actually got to do things that will be of interest to people. So we sat and thought about all of those things. We also thought that we have to really value our volunteers and not just expect them to come up, turn up, do some boring, mundane task and then go away again. Why don't we invest in them? Why don't we offer training? Both myself and Emma are trainers. Let's also have our volunteering slot on the same day. Let's choose a day. I think we had a Wednesday, or was it a Thursday? I think it was a Wednesday, and in the morning. And so everybody comes out, whatever it was, 9. We have a bit of a session inside, especially in February, whatever, it was cold. We talk about what we were going to do. We had a plan of action for the day. And when they get a task, we go out and do it. If you're still there at lunchtime, you get a bowl of soup. And we usually could pretty much make soup or something out of the garden every week. So you felt part of a team. That was really, really, really important, to draw people in, make them feel valued, make them feel like we're learning something too. Okay. So as we now planned our garden, we also started to think about stages of development and what maybe some of the activities that we could do within it that might build interest. So we thought about, here we go, building a shelter, other skills that maybe go in with that, whether it was, we wanted people to learn how to use hand tools. We wanted people how to have an understand about sources of materials, composting, recycling, stuff like that. Many things. You can see there was our brainstorm. That was the beginning of us thinking, you could break down gardening into so many different elements, so many different activities, and maybe we could build interest or cluster of interest around each one of those activities. And we could find a way in to engage with the community. Look, they even designed us a little logo, which was fun, little Harry, come Harry the Hedgehog. And we started then to sequence things and to create some diaries and think about how we might break down this task of designing, building this garden and spread that over time. All of this was just theory for the purposes of learning that we did it as a design on a PDC. I took those ideas to Cwm Harry and I said, this is basically, here's our concept, this is what we think we can do for you. These are the stepping stones we're going to use to get there, and these are the things that we would use to do it. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to do the activity. And then Cwm Harry got back in touch with me. Adam Kenley, chief executive, said, hey, Steve, what if we gave you a job to build that garden? We've got a little bit of money in a pot. It's, they mentioned that. And whatever it was, I can't remember, it was a day or a day and a half a week or something. I can't remember, 2 days a week or something like that. And a little bit of money to start it off. So not a lot, but a whole lot more than nothing. So I agreed. And I instantly shared the wage with Emma and decided we would job share. She would be the lead horticulture kind of person, and I'd be the permaculture person. Now, also, they told me at that time, Cwm Harry had submitted a lottery bid to People and Places Fund to do something like this. They wanted to do a kind of a longer project based around community growing, and they felt that would fit in really well with their compost business. And just about the time we started this, their bid had been rejected, and they had been told, in part, one of the reasons their bid had not been successful was because they're an organization that makes compost. They have no experience of community gardening, and they have no track record. And so, but they're welcome to resubmit the bid in the future. So That was where we were at. So, and there's our base sort of first level plan, if you like, as well, that we got from our PDC. The polytunnels were already there. This big long bed A was already there, and I think these other ones were as well, but that was about it. And in our design, we realized was we put in a lot more sort of main crop beds so that we could increase the yield of the garden. We wanted to have soft fruit and extend that as diversity. We would have, we'd put in a dozen of these micro allotments, and that again, a different way of recruiting people. So we might, some volunteers might want to work on the main crop beds. Some volunteers might want to have their own little plots. We're going to put a roundhouse in because there's a people space. It's somewhere for the volunteers to sit and eat their sandwiches or get out of the rain or whatever it is, like something enticing to people. And we also thought, because basically this far side of the garden was the north side, and there already was some big tall trees there, we thought, let's just carry on and put espalier fruit trees all around the edge, all around the rest of the back, all down this side. So we could stack in loads and loads of fruit trees. So it's not quite an original vision thing, but anyway, that was what we kind of pitched to Cwm Harry, and they liked it, and they said, yeah, go for it. And we had enough money in the budget to build this meterage of path, whatever it is. So again, we had carefully worked out that we could have an out and return path that kind of goes diagonally across the site, gets you to the far corner, and then comes back again by a sort of an easy route. So again, it makes it really easy for people to visit. You don't necessarily have to put your wellies on, or even if you're in a wheelchair, or you can't lift your feet very hard, you still could visit. Okay, so off we went. We started off, germinate some seeds, build a vision, bring people onto the site, start getting people, recruiting people to your idea, to your concept. The next rule is do something visible, because a few things germinating in pots isn't quite as exciting as having a big, dangerous looking machine like that. And that's a hole driller. The guy on the right, his name is Wayne. He's a really great guy. He just moved to the area. I met him through a permaculture design course. Him and his family and some friends, they have started a housing co-op called Tanavron, which is near Myvod, and they're doing amazing work. This was just before then. This was part of us building our little permaculture guild of people. So me and Wayne started drilling holes in the ground. This young man with his shirt off, he's on community reparations. If you do stuff like, I don't know, drunk and disorderly, laddish behaviour, you get caught with some weed or get kicked out of a nightclub or something, you usually get some community hours. You have to go and do a bit of community service. So we could access that through the social services in Newtown. Interestingly, the handler, the guy who brought the guys over, he was also called Steve Jones. And I knew him because he used to be a BBC Wales commentator and he used to come to CAT. Anyway, him and Wayne had got on like a house on fire because they were both motorcycle people. Anyway, that's what I remember. So building relationships with the community very, very slowly. And don't forget, Cwm Harry had not been very successful at doing that. So part of our budget, I can't remember how much we had now, but let's say we had about $3,000 or something. It wasn't loads. We had to condition this ground. It was so badly compacted. And people said to us, oh, you'll have to plow it all up. It floods. Obviously, when it rains, the water can't infiltrate in. But of course, we'd already done our survey, and we'd also realized there's that big building is we can take the water off the roof. We've got an almost unlimited supply of compost. I can bring that soil back to life. We can cover it with this MyPEC fabric, put loads of compost on there, exclude the light, the weeds will die, the worms will come and eat the compost, and we'll start bringing the soil back to life. There's the uprights for our roundhouse going in. So again, it looked like something was happening. And it was, oh, look, and you can even see, here's the fence, look, around the edge. And this is where we had all our espalier trees going in. So we wanted a sort of solid fruiting edge to it all. And I thought that would be fun. Oh gosh, time is flying, isn't it? Okay, all right. Okie dokie, okie dokie. F5, no, that one. On we go. So there used to be, it's gone now, a huge sawmill in Newtown, not very far away. So we went and looked at what was cheap. Well, their offcuts, the sawdust, bark peelings, all that kind of stuff. So, and the only thing I spent money on were these Douglas fir posts for the uprights. We needed some structural timbers to make sure the roundhouse was solid. There's Emma and other some of our volunteers. There's the roundhouse going up, and it really worked. This is Dave Thomas. We'd met him. That's the first time we'd met Dave. Oh, hi, you've got there. You're there. Hi. How was your journey, Lindsay? Is it okay? Obviously, you made it, so it can't have been that bad. Sean is there as well in his caravan, so great, and I will see you there tomorrow morning. I'm telling the story of Cwm Harry in Newtown, and I'm recording it as well, so you can get the bits you missed. And although we were designing and building a community garden, we kind of realised that it's not very sexy, the idea of picking weeds, and that's how a lot of people just are thought about gardening. So instead, we built a low-impact structure. I met Dave Thomas through that. He came on a PDC the next year, and the year after that, he came and worked on a PDC with me the year after that, where he met the woman he's now married to and has 2 kids with. So anyway, that's how it all kind of works. There's another volunteer, Emma. Basically, building this roundhouse just captured everyone's imagination. We built this lovely reciprocal beam roof. It was a very rough and ready structure, but it was just a load of fun to do it. And where they'd never had more than 1 or 2 volunteers before, we had at least a dozen people just working on the building. And once we started doing on the building, we started showing them how to do greenwood carpentry, making benches and chairs and stuff. You can see the garden itself now starting to come together, the shape slowly forming. There's our path, our accessible path going around, and the beginning of the micro allotment plots. Some of our volunteers is ladies, Sue from Keep Wells Tidy, who were very good. They funded us with very small amounts of money, but like 500 quid here and whatever, a grand there, and that really, really helped. And remember them, Keep Wells Tidy. They have a lot of quite good programs. You can see there's the big compost factory. And what I did was I found out where the downpipes were for the factory and put a big tank in, huge 1,800 litre tank. I put it on, raised it up on a plinth, so it was above. It was ever so slightly higher than the rest of the garden, so I could then flow the water through by gravity and water all of the different beds and what have you. Catch and store water, keep it as high in the system as you can. Same rules every time. So, you know, as it sort of came together, drew in more people. Drew in more people as we got to the finishing off, and then suddenly it was something that people wanted to be a part of. This is a friend, Richie, teaching this lady here how to use hand tools. She'd wanted to know how to do greenwood carpentry ever since she was a girl, but her granddad had never taught her because he taught her brother. And I think, how many women are there out there who never, you know, frustrated because they were told they had to play with dolls and perhaps they wanted to have a go at something else? And in fact, Richie, my friend Richie's actually started offering some exclusively female-only carpentry courses after this, and realised that it was, you know, kind of a ready market for people who wanted to learn how to use their hands. This woman, after some weeks of volunteering, I was asking her about it, her experience, and I remember she teared up. She was so happy; it had meant so much to her, and given her the confidence to go on and, you know, do whatever it was that she wanted to do next. So that was that's really nice. So there's our lovely structure coming together. Look how inviting and so it is. We insulated the roof with wool, put living roof on it. And as you can see then, we started to fill this garden up, make it inviting. It never looked like this before. Here's our compost. You can see shape is coming. We grew lots of things like potatoes through the Mypex fabric as a way of conditioning and preparing the soil, and, you know, step by step. The only machine we had, we did everything with hand tools. The only machine we had was this diesel-powered rotavator, and we used less than 1 gallon of diesel on the whole project. But it did help break up some of the clay pan of the car park. But I have to say, I mainly used crimson clover and lupins as a green manure, and the soil got better and better. So there's me, I just picked up a stick that was on the ground and it's totally infused with mycelium. And that was when I felt this literal excitement of, wow, it's coming to life. This is it. It's the soil's coming to life. This is Chris, who's one of our regular volunteers, lovely guy, coming back from a long-term injury. He'd had a brain injury or a head injury or something. And it changed his personality. Actually, he told me he'd been a maths teacher, and now he's not interested in that at all. And he found he was interested in he's picking that leek. And on that day, I know he was hungry. He had no money, and he has no food in his house. And he went home and he made leek soup. That experience was life changing for him. He actually now, for the next several years, I'm not quite sure what he's doing now. I'm not in touch with the project directly. I would like to take us there though and to see it. Anyway, so he got into cooking and he became the chef who cooked the lunches for the volunteers as the project went forward. Okay, so bringing the site to life, step by step, we realized that we could just keep adding elements, adding complexity, keep making things, weaving things, basketry, creativity in any way that we could. And then this happened. This is 2011. These are 6 specialist teachers and trainers from Uganda who came over as part of an exchange visit between farmers in Wales and farmers in East Africa. And I hosted their visit. Meeting these people changed my life. And maybe in some ways it affected their lives greatly too. And within a few years, that was what really led to me starting to do teaching work in Uganda with specifically these people, with these 6 people. I know very good friends with this lady here in the white, Connie Kauna. This guy, Paul Masaneru, is one of the leading forest farming people in Uganda. This guy's called Wilbur. He teaches at the same school as Connie, where we have put a food forest in the school, and so on. Anyway, connections. These are connections that wouldn't have happened without this garden. These are PDC students, seed saving. So I found that I could bring any other external training or teaching I was doing. I could then start to use the garden as a training center and bring them there. And it's actually very easy to do training in a place that's been set up exactly for that purpose. Here's Emma doing a training session in the morning. We had a room within the big factory building that we could use. And there's, well, again, one of our volunteers, Lucas, the guy with the blonde hair, and Grace, at a school fair, doing outreach to, try and draw in other kinds of volunteers. There's a fruit trees for a fruit tree outreach project. There's another PDC group being taught by Emma in the garden. She was always running courses. I was running courses. We had our own volunteer team with all those kind of visitors coming by. And we managed to kind of fill up the program, keep it busy. We started getting awesome produce. Pumpkins, this is amaranth, loads and loads of amaranth. We tried growing different crops. This was year 2. Look at those cabbages. That is Cwm Harry compost in soil that had been a car park only 18 months before. And that's how far we got in those 2 years. Fennel, we managed to get the fertility really up. This is our first biochar experiment. Working with this guy in the red jumpsuit. He's one of Asperger's kids. One of his brains, very clever, but his brain's going like 10,000 times a second. And he'll ask you a really deep question about physics or astrophysics or something, and then he'll begin to formulate an answer, and then he'll ask you a question about football, and then he'll talk about his favorite book, and you're still wondering about the first question. Anyway, nice guy. I really enjoyed his company. And what we did was, well, again, we learned, don't just give them shitty, mundane jobs, give them things and begin to explain to people why you're doing what you're doing. So there's our first biochar experiment. We had them growing ochre in a series of beds to do a double-blind test. Complexity of the garden grows. Loads of individuals who sort of came up. This is one of our micro plot holders. Now, she had her own garden and she had access to land and she knew how to grow. But I think she was a violin maker or something really specific like that. But spent lots of her time in a shed, in a room by herself doing her thing. And sometimes, wanted to connect with people. So again, multiple functions. Gardens serve many reasons. We were challenged to design a raised bed for someone, which turned into a little micro business for us for a while. There it is. That's it. After 2 years, there's your garden. That's what we managed to turn it into. And what happened then was, Cwm Harry lost the contract to make the compost. And we were told we had to set the garden down. And that was devastating. But at the same time, in the time, the 18 months, 2 years whilst we'd run this project, we'd also worked with Cwm Harry to rewrite their National Lottery People and Places bid, and that had been successful. And we got £225,000 over 3 years to create 4 part-time jobs. And that's the before and that's the after. That's our sort of conversion of this rather not very nice space into something that was really, really, really very productive and involved interactions with many, many people. There's our little tool shed and, all the different elements and the micro plots and the main plots and everything. So something out of nothing, really. Again, more volunteers. Actually, this guy, Lucas, I could say all the different stories about all these people. When he came to us, he told me at first, he said, well, I'm not getting a lot of sleep and, my life's a bit erratic and, I'm kind of drinking quite a lot, so I feel a bit lost. And then he admitted he was doing a lot of speed. And then he told me he was also using heroin. And it's just basically, pretty much a mess. But suddenly he was like, but I'm going to be there on Thursdays, whether I've been up for 3 days or not. I'm going to start. This is going to be a focus in my life, was coming and being part of this garden. A year later, he did a PDC. A couple of years later than that, he was out in Brazil working on projects. And he found his way back into life, into positivity by being engaged with, But then we discovered that propagating perennial plants is something you can train people how to do in 20 minutes. You just set up a little process, show them what they need to do, get them to repeat it a few times. And people can then sit and making little sticks and cuttings and chat away. And it's a really nice, simple, sort of repetitive task, but happy to do it for a few hours, once a week. And then you pot everything on. And then the next thing you know, you've got loads of plants. So again, we're trying to think about stacking yields, thinking about the training, the team building, but also actually generating materials that are going to help us to then expand out, if you like, and start more gardens in other places. And that's what we would, that's what we started then to have the aspiration towards. And that was really what the Cultivate project was about. This is what we managed to get the bidding. So actually the project was called Get Growing, actually. And oh look, when you dig a frog pond and then you come back and it's full of frogs, it's moving. It's an experience. It's a thing. It really is. And it was so exciting to see this dead land come back to life, literally come to life. If you moved anything, a flower pot or a piece of wood or something that was lying in the garden, 10 baby frogs would jump out. The place came alive. Who was it who asked me about seed saving the other day? So, okay, I'm going to stop because we're running out of time. I'm going to do, the story does go on a bit. There's the garden being taken down. I'll just do the last little pieces about seed saving, and then I'll perhaps say tomorrow a bit or another day about the second part of this project. We'll go to Cultivate. It's better to see it. So this woman came and volunteered, and she said, "I like gardening. I'd like to volunteer, please. My name's Sue." I said, "Oh, that's nice, Sue. Thank you. What do you like to do? Anything particular?" She said, "Oh, I don't mind. I'll do a bit of weeding." So she came week after week, week in, week out, very reliable volunteer, and she'd come, and I noticed that she worked hard. She was attentive. She knew what she was doing. I was kind of impressed. Anyway, further into the thing, we'd been collecting seeds. Needs of volunteers putting seeds in packets. I thought, let's put it on the internet. Well, actually, they gave, so you can see, a free seed swap. Newtown Town Council let us have the use of this shop for a week for free. It was empty. And we thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a shop on the high street and just give stuff away, give away our seeds, give away as a way of, and there's people in there getting the seeds as a tool that we can use to engage with the public. So I advertised it, and I put it out there on the internet a bit. And I got a letter from a green publishing company. I think they were called Green Books, something like that. And they said, oh, we just noticed your seed saving event, seed swap event. You might like to stock a few copies of this book. It's called Backyard Seed Savers Handbook or something. And it's by Sue Stickland. And I thought, oh, that's a funny coincidence. We have a volunteer called Sue Stickland. So I went to Sue and said, hey, Sue, never guessed this. But there's a book on seed saving being sent in the post, and it's written by someone with your name. And she said, well, yes, that's because I wrote it. I was like, oh my God. And she said, well, yeah, actually, I was head gardener at Wrighton Organic Gardens. I was the founder. That's the Centre for Organic Growing in Britain. And I'm a writer for the RHS Garden magazine. And I was like, oh, okay. So we've actually got one of the most experienced organic growers in Britain volunteering our garden, and she never told us. And someone else said, oh yeah, that's Sue. She's very modest. So never take people for granted is my story. Never underestimate people. Very quiet, very softly spoken lady, hugely knowledgeable. So there she is, standing with a lettuce plant. There's a big tall lettuce plant behind her. There's one in front that's her seeded, and she's just explaining there about seed saving and the different strategies for doing it. So it's really an enormous experience. We were very, very sort of sad when we had to take it down. None of the volunteers came to help to take the garden down. It was just too destroying for them. It broke our hearts. We wanted to bring all the soil, all the frogs and everything. We brought tadpoles. We seeded the new garden from everything that came from the old garden. And from that, we created this Get Growing project, which was a 3-year project, which created Cultivate, really. And that's a fun thing. So this is the Cultivate Centre now. This is what it was back then. And this is Newtown College. This is a very big car park. And Newtown College, what it is, they bought this property. It's a little small holding. It's about 3 acres of land. This is a little cottage, little bungalow. And this is an agricultural sort of shed. And the college had bought it because they do teach farming and stuff. And they didn't teach horticulture, but they did do farming, and obviously it's a rural area. And they thought it would be useful. It turned out they hadn't really utilized it. And so they gave it to us on a peppercorn rent for 10 years back in, well, it looks like 2012 is when I took this picture. So probably then. So we probably had it for about 8 years now. I hope we'll continue. But anyway, it was a really, really massive opportunity to suddenly move up from being on the smelly old vastry estate behind a compost factory to suddenly having a dedicated 3-acre site with actually quite a nice, comfortable building. And even more is the college actually ripped out the building and put in, Formica floors and fire alarms and all that sort of stuff. So it was now suitable for them to send their students to use the facilities there. So we thought, okay, great, we're in a new space. How do we build relationships to the people around us? Can we build relations to the college, relations to this housing association here? Same railway line going past. And turns out the big sawmill was just across the road as well, Owens. And so, gave us materials to start the garden off. So I will stop there because we've had our hour. But what you've seen is that story of, we started a garden kind of in the wrong place, but without really the right resources. But it gave us experience, it gave us momentum. And from that, actually, we were able to then create a project that has lasted. And the wonderful thing, the thing I'm most proud about what is now Cultivate, is we had funding for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015. When that funding finished, I moved on. I then moved full-time to working Sector 39 and starting to do the Uganda work. And the project carried on just run by its volunteers. And the interesting thing is, 5 years later, it's still there. 5 years later, they managed to, build some other projects, and they're running other projects from within the space. And Michelle knows about that because she's involved in one of them. And there's some of the activities that we initiated has now evolved to slightly different things. But hey, that's the nature of things. That's how things move forward. So there you go. There's a really nice story of Cwm Harry and how we got to go to Cultivate. And I very much hope we'll plan our time carefully over the weekend. I'd love to take us all there to see it probably on Sunday. And yeah, so I'm going to cease there because I've gone 7 minutes over time. So apologize about that. But yeah, any thoughts or feedback or questions? Or was that interesting for you, Michelle, to see how it came about?
That was really interesting because I've heard a lot about how they started and where they started, and I've only just recently heard that the Roundhouse started life somewhere else.
Yes,
and
we brought everything with us.
It's just really, really interesting to see how it all started, and some of the pictures of everyone looking really young. Yeah, really.
Yeah, right.
Really good.
I've always thought about this, by the way. I'm ageless, but all the others, No.
What did that place become then, Stephen? When you took all your stuff off it?
I think it's empty. I don't know. And we had to take the whole garden down, and it was very painful to do that. But luckily, we had somewhere to take it.
Yeah, it could have just been left alone, couldn't it? And
I know. I was. The landlord said they wanted it returned to the state, but we'd received it. And I was like, "You're kidding me!" It was.
You'd improved it. What a misery.
I know. But I mean, literally, I promise you, we dug up every single tree, everything we could. We brought it with us because we didn't, it was just too heartbreaking.
Yeah, good. So what's the schedule for tomorrow? What time will you make?
I'm going to try and be there for 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
I'm in Telford at the moment, so it's only about an hour away, so I should be able to manage that. And we'll take it from there.
Okay.
We'll hang out a bit. I think tomorrow we'll explore the farm. I'll find out how much time Ian has, and we'll just kind of, I just juggle things a bit between, whether he's got a crisis on or not, or he's very good at explaining the organic systems on the farm. And over the years of hosting PDCs and hearing us talk about it, he's had more and more practice at doing it as well. So I very hope to download quite a lot of Ian's brain, have a good look around the farm, have a nice walk, and eat pies. Saturday, I'm going to bring you all to Llanfwllyn. I'm going to see a community garden, forest garden there that we've been working on since 2013, I think, 2014. They originally started within the Get Growing project. I'm going to show you a natural constructed wetland as well, so you can see a wet system. I think that's really interesting. And a little community horticulture hub as well, which we've done in Llanfwllyn. And if you have the legs for it, we might even go and have a look at Llanfwllyn Workhouse as well, which is another very, very unique, very special project that, again, I've been engaged in for quite a few years. I'm trying to move on now, not to turn my back on things, but I think that, as a permaculture pioneer, I want to start projects, but I don't necessarily know. I want to nurture them until they don't need me and then move on. So a lot of the things that you're going to see over the weekend are things that I've been doing in the last 8 or 10 years. So I'm not I'm now trying to encourage them to find their own self-managing, self-regulating, so that they can have a life of their own. Because that's when you completed your job as a designer, is when it doesn't need you anymore. So we're trying to get to that point. And there will be some volunteers on Saturday morning, we call it Kai Bodvach, which is our community heritage orchard. There's going to be some volunteers there starting to prune and stuff. And it's an activity which has not been organised by me, but by other people. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very excited about, that sort of trying to pass the baton on. But it's also my baby. And I, want to be there and be part of it. So it's great. We're going to be there with our own slightly separate agenda. And we might get to do a bit of pruning and stuff anyway as well. And hopefully eat some raspberries. The last time I went there were lots of raspberries. So
Great.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the story whilst we're there about how we built this garden, because I learned so much from the Cwm Harry project, and then that's giving me the confidence to take on other projects elsewhere. And you see, I've got several other in mind that we're now moving towards working on next.
Great.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Okay, I'll see you in the morning. I'll
See
try
you
my
there
best.
tomorrow morning. So if you want proper cooked breakfast and eggs and beans and sausages, you can let Ian know. Otherwise, we'll have some pies and salad for lunch tomorrow. You'll get to eat some of the produce from the farm. They do great food.
Yep.
If there's anything special, you won't bring it. If you have special porridge or breakfast or whatever. Okay.
I had a meal with them this evening. It was really lovely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really
Lindsay.
nice.
So great. So great. I can't wait to be there and see you all. Yeah.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Sleep well. Yeah.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.